are going to live through probably one of the most influential times in human history. It's unbelievable. When you think of other times in history that have been like this, you think of the Industrial Revolution. You think of the time in which we went from an agrarian culture to a more industrial culture. Okay? Hunter-gatherers are an agrarian. We are at one of those major shifts in time today, right now. Sarah talked about Australia and the dual flush toilet. That's a survival mechanism. Australia has been in a drought for the last 30 years. We have only been in a drought in California and the US for the last 8 years. We are just now beginning to discuss issues with respect to water. For water issues, you go to Australia to find answers. This chart here is actually looking at the graphing of global footprint. And it looks at the global hectares per hectare, or the footprint of the nations based on how much area they have.
The purple right here means that you're at capacity over 7.5 Earths. If you look at China, you look at Europe, and you look at parts of New York, California, we are currently consuming 7.5 Earths.
Us, as human beings. And we talk about global equality. And if you notice and you look at this graph, the majority of the consumption is happening north of the equator. It is the northern hemisphere that is putting and taking the majority of the natural resources of the earth and putting the burden on the southern hemisphere, the developing hemisphere, the one that we are currently looking to help out. But there needs to be a balance. And that is what you're beginning to see in this global economy. And we need to find the balance. So when I look at this graph, I look at us today, or us in 1960, which is relatively sparsely populated, and you look at Europe in 1960, okay? You look at Europe today, and you look at us today. We are currently about the same place Europe was in 1960. I go to Germany in 1960. They had an existing building renovation program, which was probably the most successful existing building renovation program ever in the history of the world. And we here in the US are trying to figure out how to put together an existing building program. We should be going over the sea to find out how we do this. You as product developers should be going to other countries to find out how to innovate and to learn. So if you look at population growth, we essentially, from 1900 to today, we've doubled. The US has doubled in population. We are projecting to be 40 million by the year 2030. We will almost double again in the next 20 years. So the adverse effects that these two things are having on the earth is global warming, I don't know. I mean, depending upon which scientist I'm talking to that day, is what's happening. All I know is that something's happening on Earth, and that carbon's bad. I put my kid in a room with carbon, they're gonna die. So can we begin to look at a carbon-based culture versus a kilowatt-based culture? Again, you go to Europe, the BREEAM system, they've actually began to look at a carbon-based culture. They've actually began to measure buildings based on their carbon footprint, not on their kilowatt consumption, which we measure in California. And only in California do we measure. The US is currently putting together a standard 189, by which the entire US can begin to quantify the consumption of energy of buildings. In California, we quantify the consumption of buildings, and California has essentially stagnated in per capita consumption since 1974, when we actually adopted Title 24, an energy code. Okay? I'll try and not to talk too much about numbers and stuff because you guys aren't all building industry professionals, but essentially in California, we have a code by which we have a standard to build to in energy. That code was adopted in 1974, and our per capita consumption has stagnated since then, whereas the rest of the United States has spiked. Okay? I'll come back to that at the end. So, why an opportunity? Why now? Why construction? Well, why do you have an architect here? Okay. This is a study done by Architecture 2030, and the U.S. Energy Administrator, okay? This actually shows you that buildings consume almost 50% of the energy in the U.S. It's not cars that have the problem, it's buildings. This graph shows you here that currently we have about 300 billion square feet of real estate in the United States today. In the next 30 years, we are going to demolish, okay, about 30% of that, okay? We will renovate or remodel half of that. We will build new to keep up with population, another 150 billion square feet by the year 2030. And you ask why? Because if you go back to 1950 post-war, industrialization, it was the single most important thing in the U.S. We needed to house our troops, we needed to build our schools, we needed to put our guys back in school, get them educated, and we had the biggest construction boom that the United States has ever seen. The average life of a building is about 60 years. We are at that point in time. We have the convergence of the renovation of the majority of the existing inventory, including this building, in the U.S., along with population growth. All this coming on the coattails of us finding out that the world's falling apart and that we, as the building industry, consume about 50% of the energy. So herein lies the opportunity. If in the next 20 years we are going to renovate 3/4 of the total built environment in the U.S., we have an opportunity to actually affect change. You, as designers, have an opportunity to affect change. It is no longer about business, it is about changing the world and providing our children with a place to live. If we adopt an initiative to step down the energy consumption of the buildings by 10 to 20% in 10 years, by 50% in 20 years, and by 100%, okay, by 2030, we will essentially hit 1990 levels by 2030. And we will begin to regenerate or bring back the earth. If we do business as usual, we will continue to move down this upward spiral or downward spiral, whichever way you want to look at it. So how are we currently building? This is where observed opportunity comes from. I call it observed opportunity. You look at how we currently build homes. We've been building homes like this for probably 150 years. We clear cut the forest, we make little sticks, we build it, we live in it, we demolish it, we throw it in the trash. We start over and we do it again. Observed opportunity. We need to begin to look at the life cycle of a product. So I sit on a couple advisory boards, and this is one of them. In this observation, we began to look at things. We began to look at things wastefully. In California, about 23% of the energy in California goes to shipping water around the state. 23% of the energy in California goes to shipping water around the state. If you look at this is a conventional landscape, okay? It's about probably 40% efficient. What we did is we actually created a controlled flood system. This is the system here, okay? It's a controlled flood. It's essentially a drip irrigation for lawns. It's 95 to 100% efficient. It has a 50% reduction in irrigation for lawns. Observed opportunities. Actually, California State is legislating that within 5 feet you either have no spray heads or you incorporate some level of irrigation like this. This is another advisory board I sat on. This is an interesting story you might understand or you might know about or you might not. In California we have cow redemption, right? We pay in our tax dollars to redeem bottles. But we also pay to take those bottles to the dump. In California, we currently do not have a use for recycled bottles. at the capacity that we're currently recycling. This product here, we actually replaced the silica sand in concrete. So we're making these concrete countertops with recycled bottles, and we actually have an 87% recycled content countertop. And this countertop, you can actually tool like solid surface. And the last board that I sit on, we are beginning to look at the way we construct buildings differently. We are beginning to incorporate technology into the manufacturing process of buildings. So you begin to look at product development, you begin to look at products in a different manner, and you begin to try and learn from not only other countries, but other industries. So we're looking at the auto industry to try and figure out a better way to build buildings. And in doing so, we're creating this building that actually has a cradle-to-cradle lifespan. That we will actually have a cradle-to-cradle certification in building construction. This building goes together like a kit of parts, but at the end of the life of the building, I can either change out the finish, or I can take the parts out of that building and use them on a new building. There are no mechanical fasteners in the system. It clicks together. And we have integrated into this product type, we have actually integrated the systems into the building itself. So as we move forward with these opportunities, and I told you I would come back to California, okay? As we move forward with these opportunities, 1974, the average fridge in California used 250 kilowatt hours per year. The average fridge today uses 25 kilowatt hours per year. 25 kilowatts, 1/10 the energy. And we beat ourselves up every day to try and save energy on the brand new product. When I look at that fridge of 1974, and I look at the fridge today, we need to renovate that fridge, okay? But when I look at the mainframe computer of 1970, and I look at my computer, you all have iPhones, I have this, okay? When I look at my computer, this happened in 20 years. Actually less. 1992, I had one of those bat phones, okay? I had the flip phone, but when the battery went out, I had the bat phone too, okay? That happened in less than 20 years. It happened because of collaboration. It happened because of open sourcing. The internet got to where it is today because of HTML. It was a common language that we all understood, and we dealt with it, and we went on. Good, bad, indifferent, who cares? So as we move forward, and as we transform the industry, transform your industry and mine, we will begin to create buildings that operate at the capacity, far surpassing anything we thought they could today. And I look forward to seeing what every single one of you are going to do, because I know it's going to far surpass what I do. Okay? We're just opening doors, and we're not even close to where we're going to be in 20 years. And it's going to be you guys who actually make the change. So I'm going to leave you with one last thought. Optimism starts with a thought, starts with a feeling, it ends with an action. I look forward to seeing the actions that we all take.